Mavs Fans for Life podcast. I am Landon Thomas, joined by my co-host Shahnavaz Makhani. Shahnavaz, the Mavericks are constantly soaring within the stretch right now. I mean, they won 7 of the last 8 games. They kind of had to, the way things were going and how the West is dominating this season. Yeah, in this episode, we're going to talk about it a little bit, but specifically, Spencer Dinwiddie has came alive the last 2 games. Luka Dončić is coming back. He's doubtful for the Jazz game, but, you know, he made the trip. They play tomorrow again against the Portland Trailblazers, so a back-to-back. You would think he would play tomorrow. And then we'll also talk about this important, very, very crucial 5-game stretch that the Mavericks have to take care of business to climb up the West. It's an important time. So let's get into it. Shahnavaz, Spencer Dinwiddie, let's start with him. I mean, he's really came alive the last 2 games. Obviously, you know, we were talking about him. I mean, he's really, it's weird because, you know, you look at the stats and you look at the eye test, it changes each game. Like, his role changes each game. Some nights he needs to score. Some nights he just needs to pass. And some nights, you know, you're really asking for more from him just to show some more energy. But the last 2 games have been really great. He's averaging 21.5 points, 6.5 assists, 3 rebounds. And he's really been shooting the ball at a clip. I mean, 63.6 from the floor, 58.3 behind the arc. Obviously, they played the Hawks and the Knicks in the last 2 games, so not easy games. I mean, the Hawks, they just advanced to the knockout rounds in a group with the Celtics and Cavs. And then, you know, the Knicks, they've been playing well lately. Obviously, they have ups and flows with the roster. They're still trying to build continuity. But what have you seen from Spencer specifically in the last 2 games?
I just see an increased level of confidence, especially after that Miami game. I think, you know, taking that really, really bad shot and Jason Kidd, you know, playing him too much, I think, in overtime, you know, really hindered the team. And I think that had a lot to do with Miami losing, just with the shot selection. But I think it goes back to the trust in Spencer, right? With Luka out, with Dante Exum out, kind of don't have a choice but to play him, you know, and I think he really took that upon his shoulders. He's a vet, you know, he's been here before. He's done it throughout the league, you know, with a lot of different teams. This is a guy that has won, I think he's won 6th Man of the Year, if I'm not mistaken, when he was with Brooklyn. We've seen him have really, really good games in the past, even with the Mavericks. So I think it just speaks to the trust that the coaching staff and his teammates have with him. You know, there's a certain respect level there. And even after that Miami game, it would have been easy to bench him and not play him, you know, in against the Hawks and against the Knicks. But, you know, again, we go back to the depth of this team, and with Luka out, you really need somebody to step up. And you look at, we talked about it last week, the whole roster. I mean, dating back to the Spurs game, the Mavs have had at least 6 players in double figures in every single game. And a lot of those are games with multiple players in scoring over 20, which just speaks to the ball distribution. It speaks to the you know, this kind of new offense that the Mavericks are running. You know, you can tell it's very different than kind of the heliocentric stuff from years past. And I think when you've got a lot of players, you've got multiple ball handlers on the team, that sets you up for success. And Spencer's one of those guys where, much like Tim Hardaway Jr., he can be hot, he can be cold, but when he's on, he's on. And in the last 2 games, you've seen that. And I think it really speaks to the leadership of this team. I think it really speaks to the respect that the coaching staff and this team and the teammates have for Spencer Dinwiddie, and just the trust in him being a vet and being a guy who has loved playing in Dallas, who really is making a difference now, because you needed somebody to step up, right? I mean, the defense is going to focus on Kyrie Irving, and we've seen PJ step up, we've seen Najee step up, but really you needed that other guard. You know, who's going to be that guy that can, you know, whether it's off the bench or starting, to come in and kind of take over that scoring load that Luka Dončić left while he's been injured. And Spencer's done that the last 2 games, and I think it's been great.
Yeah, I think it has, and I think it also is a staple that you kind of need with Jaden Hardy's inconsistency.
Yep.
I mean, you look at the last 2 games, you know, Hardy was lighting it up against the Hawks. He had 23 points and then 44% from the floor. And then the next game against the Knicks, he has 5 points at 20% from the floor. So I think that's like like you said, it's a trust with Spencer, because even though Spencer is, when he doesn't have his night shooting the ball, he still distributes the ball. And that's
Yeah.
one of the things, like you said, just being a veteran, having that trust from the teammates, having that trust from the coaches, especially Jason Kidd. It's an attribute of that, because with Hardy, he's more of a shooter, and when he's hot, but when he's not, he's not really, his playmaking and distribution of the ball is it's not there all the way, so he's still growing in that area. But with Spencer, he talked about it too recently after practice. He said that the communication was great with Jason Kidd and Nico. And I think that's huge.
Yeah.
Especially when you're a guy coming to a deep team already, and your role, because that could change the dynamic of the locker room if Spencer didn't know his role, but he knows his role. Even Jason Kidd talked about after the last game that Spencer knows he's going to play when players are resting or players are hurt, and that's the biggest thing, is that's his role. Like when players are out, he's going to play a lot of minutes. Go get your buckets or go play make. But when players are healthy, you see it. He only plays a little bit, or if at all. And I think that's a big staple in this front office, because now they're having that communication with each player, where they know where they fit in the puzzle. Because with having a deep team, you want to know everybody having their distinct role, because that pays to the success. And we've seen it last 8 games. Everyone has been really showing out, and I think that's attribute of teamwork.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because you look at other teams across the league, with new players that have come in. Take Dante DiVincenzo, for example, right? You're hearing rumblings of he wants out of Minnesota because he wants to start. He wanted out of New York because he wants to start. DiVincenzo as a bench option is probably, would be amazing for any team, right? We saw what he did in Golden State as well. So to have a guy in Spencer, and that comes with years in the league and playing and understanding, your fit.
And you think, Spencer, he has the mindset where he can still start in the league.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But for him to be able to say, I understand my role, this is where I want to be, very much like we've talked about with Klay Thompson joining the Mavs. This is where I want to be. I know what this team is trying to do, and I'll whatever role I have to play, that's what I'll play, right? That's what I'll do to make sure that I set this team up for success. And you're right with Jaden Hardy. We've seen Jaden Hardy. I think he's grown a lot this year. I think in a lot of the games he's played, we've seen him play really, really well. But some of the mistakes he makes are really head scratching. We've seen some really bad turnovers from him, whether it's errant passes, whether it's just ball handling. We've seen him make a lot of really, really poor decisions. And so I think having a guy like Spencer who can come in and alleviate that when Hardy is struggling is just a great luxury for this team.
Yeah, it is. And they're going to need it against the Jazz, because the Jazz, for some reason, always have their number no matter where they're at in the standings. It's just, man, they're always coming out for the Mavericks, so they need to take care of business, especially with Luka, who's doubtful for the game. You would think he would play tomorrow with a back-to-back. So they need Spencer again tonight, and I'm excited to see how he does. He deserves his flowers, but obviously it's an 82-game season, but you want to praise players when they play well, and you want to critique when they don't play well. So we definitely wanted to highlight Spencer's specifically the last 2 games. He's really balled out. So Shahnavaz, you made a great point earlier, ball distribution. And, we kind of talked about Luka's coming back. So, it's one of those tough situations. It's not tough because they're winning. Can you imagine if they won that Heat game? They would be on an 8-game winning streak.
They should have. It's just, it's just bad communication at the end of the fourth quarter, end of regulation, to let Jimmy Butler kind of go in there. And then, overtime was just bad shot. I mean, just nothing is falling. It's one of those games.
Yeah.
It's always you said it with the Jazz. I feel like every time the Mavs play the Heat, it's always you just can't pull out a win, or you get who was it? Max Strus hitting a stupid 60-foot
Yeah.
shot to win the game last year.
Oh, that was the Cavs.
Oh, that was the Cavs. That's right. I remember Strus on the Heat.
You just having flashbacks of all the good games he had against the Mavs with the Heat.
Exactly.
And then Jimmy Butler just getting the whole team sick. I mean,
yeah. What? Somebody needs to investigate this.
Yes. So when Luka comes back, because like I said, it's not a tough situation for the team, but it is a little wrinkle in this big stretch that the Mavs had recently, where you have a top 3 player in the league coming back to a team who's played really well without him. We talked about it last week, all the role players stepping up, and then this week, you can add Spencer to that. So, Shahnavaz, how do you implement Luka into this ball movement that the Mavs have had recently?
You just put him in the lineup. We saw it.
It's Luka.
We saw it work in the Pelicans game, and the Pelicans, yes, ran out like a G League team, but it's still. I mean, you still had 7 players in double figures. Like we saw it work.
Yeah.
And I think Luka's a smart enough player where he's bought in. To what we've seen, the joy, on his face. I think he was dancing at the game the other day against the Knicks.
Yeah.
With a big smile. All he wants to do is win. And so he's not a guy that, needs the ball, or is going to demand the ball when he knows that the rest of his team is playing well. All Luka Dončić wants to do is win. And I think just integrating back in the lineup just makes the Mavericks more dangerous now that you've got really 7-8 guys that can go off for 20 at any given time. It really poses a threat to everybody that the Mavs play, because you can't focus on one player. Obviously the focus is going to be on Luka and Kyrie, but if you do that, Najee can go off, PJ can go off, Spencer can go off. We've seen Quentin Grimes have good games recently. So it just poses a threat to everybody else in the Western Conference, and Luka's going to come in and he's going to do what he does. If there's games where he's taking over, he's going to take over. If he's not, we've seen him, he's one of the best passers in the league. He's going to set his teammates up to be able to have success. And so I don't think it's going to be anything that's an issue. I think it's going to be a seamless transition to get him back in. And I think the rest helped. And the fact that the Mavericks were able to, we talked about it, I said the Mavericks were going to go 4-0 this last week. I missed it by 1 game, but we just need them to keep their head above water until Luka comes back. And now you're starting to see the role players kind of fit in a little bit better. Everyone understanding what their role is. And like I said, don't panic. It's not December yet. Don't worry, right? See, let's wait and see what happens. And now you're starting to see kind of all cylinders clicking. And you take a team that's won 7 of their last 8 games, and you plug in a top 3 player in the NBA. That should be scary for everybody else.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's not an issue at all. It is, to your point, it is a transition. And I think it's a few months of a transition. I think this is not something that will just instantly click. I mean, they are dependent upon Luka not only playing, but playing well. And I think you do have to find a balance. And I've talked about it. I would like to see Luka dominate the first quarter and fourth quarter. And I'd like to see other role players, dominate the second and third. It's where you start with Luka and you end with Luka. But, I think he's starting to do that. I think it is a transition, because we're slowly seeing it transition. His usage is down. So that is a testament of him being willing to have other players. I think it's also, I think it's also the detail of having better players, because he won't just relinquish his usage to, what we saw a couple years ago when they were having a bad season. So you bring in Kyrie, you bring in these type of players, Najee, PJ, and you have 2 bigs who you can lob it to. Finally, he's been playing with Dwight Powell, who was great at screening and, like the hustle plays. But now you have lob threats, and you have Quentin Grimes, you have Klay Thompson. You actually having role players that you can relinquish some of your responsibility to. And I think he's happy, like you said, when the team wins, and he's willing to give that duties to other players. Sometimes you see him give it to Najee, say, no, you you go lead it, or Kyrie or PJ. But I think there's also a point in time where he does fall back to, you know, I am Luka, and
Mhm.
for this team to be successful, I have to kind of orchestrate this because we saw it early in the season where he was giving it up a lot and the Mavericks were struggling.
Yeah.
So now, with him out, I think it is a blessing in disguise. You don't want Luka to be hurt. You don't want him to be have potential to get injured. You want him to be healthy. You want him to not play as much. And I think you have the team to do it when they're healthy. And now I think you have the confidence. Like you said with Spencer, you have the confidence with Grimes. And Najee, he's always had the confidence, but he's finally found his fit in the
Yeah.
offense. And then you have Clay, who's you hope when he comes back soon with the plantar, was it plantar
Plantar fasciitis.
fasciitis?
Sucks, man. I've had it before. It's awful.
Me too, and it sucks because you can't do anything. Like you have to just wait it out.
Yeah, you really can't do anything. It sucks. There's like no fix for it.
I know. And the good thing is, well, he did not practice yesterday, but he was shooting after practice, and that's good to sign to see because you personally know when you have that, you can't do anything and you have to just sit and wait. So you see him shooting, that means he's progressing at least. But I think for this team to be successful, you have to have a little bit of both because even Spencer said it. He's Luka. He's an MVP type of player. We have to be around him. And Jason Kidd said it a little bit too. There's a little mixture of both. You want guys to do this while the team is healthy. You want PJ and Najee to do this while they're playing with Kyrie and Luka and Clay. But at the same time, he's Luka. You can't really take that away. You can't take things away from Luka because he is a top 3 player in the league. That's just like saying, let's take away from Jokic. Let's take away from Giannis. So
it's all about balance. They just have to both. I think Luka's got to balance it. The coaching staff has to balance, figure out how to balance the distribution between players. And you're right. We've seen Luka kind of sometimes fall back into, I've got to do everything. But I think as he sits and watches, the team kind of play, obviously play well without him, I think it alleviates a lot of concern and stress on his part. I think he watches that and says, okay, I don't have to do everything. And I think the whole, taking the ball away from him at the beginning of games and letting PJ bring it up or Najee bring it up, I think it's a concerted effort to kind of preserve him. We saw obviously, when you get to the playoffs, we saw what Lou Dort did to him last year. And so I think it's a concerted effort to kind of help him out and make sure he's ready for the playoffs. But sometimes you're going to have to go through him, and that's the luxury of having a top 3 player on your team. And when you need him to take over, he will. But having the ability to have 6-7 players in double figures, Luka doesn't care to average 35 again. I'm sure he's comfortable averaging 27, 8, and 8. And everyone else averaging over 10. To be able to have all those options and that luxury is what makes a championship contender, because you're going to need these. You're going to need role players in the playoffs. We saw it last year in the finals. Yeah. So I think Luka understands that. I think the coaching staff understands that, and obviously the role players understand that when push comes to shove, if it's a close game, the ball's in Luka's hands or Kyrie's hands. But throughout the ebb and flow of the game, you're getting everybody their shots. You're getting everybody involved because you're going to need them. Everyone's got to maintain that level of confidence as the season progresses and you get into the stretch run, late in the season into the playoffs.
Yeah, and just to wrap it up, I think you said it well. You just said it in the finals, and that's what I think the Mavericks realized. Even though they had something going, they had to get better. They were looking across the court, and they saw 2 guys who are stars, which the Mavericks have, but they also had star role players who look like stars in the league. I mean, you have Derek White, you have Porzingis, you have Jrue Holiday, and I think that's what the Mavericks were trying to do. Let's create our Derek Whites, let's create our Jrue Holidays, let's create our Porzingis, and let's maximize PJ Washington. Let's maximize Derek Lively. Let's maximize Daniel Gafford. Let's maximize Klay Thompson in his role in 2024. Let's maximize Quentin Grimes. And I think that's what they're trying to do, have multiple guys who can step up when your two stars are getting doubled.
Yep.
All right, Shahnavaz, last word of the podcast, the schedule. You know, when you look at this schedule, obviously with the Mavericks, you know, climbing up the ranks in the West, we'll see how they do next podcast when we look back. But just looking at this next 5 games, this 5-game stretch where the Mavericks can climb up the standings in the West, because they're with the way they play in the last 8 games, they are climbing up, and they can continue that because now they got the Jazz tonight, they got the Blazers tomorrow, they got the Memphis Grizzlies, who they have to beat, you know, to get to that knockout round. Obviously, they have a great point differential, but you have to win that game to get the wild card spot. And then you have the Wizards, who are just horrible, and you got the Raptors, who are bad. So, Shahnavaz, obviously it's self-explanatory, but with the Mavericks, you never know. How crucial is it for the Mavericks to win these games, but not only win these games, but look good doing it, and with Luka Dončić being back?
It's highly critical. You've got to beat the teams that you can beat, and it's simple as that. With the way that the Mavs are playing right now, and then you integrate back Luka Dončić, there should be no reason the Mavs don't come out of this 5-0 in this stretch.
Yeah,
you know, there may be a game or two in there where it's closer than we would like, or you know, the Mavericks have to pull out another fourth quarter comeback, or they let a team back in. I could see that happening against the Raptors. I could see it happening probably the Jazz. Who knows? Just the way that they always played the Mavs. Yeah. The Grizzlies are going to be the toughest, you know, team that they're going to have to face in this next stretch. But this easily could be a 5-0 week for the Mavericks, and it quite honestly should be. You know, I think getting a stretch like this where now you can integrate Luka back in is really helpful, because you're not trying to throw him in the fire against an OKC or a Denver or a Phoenix where it's, you know, it's going to be a close game, you know, a tumble, you know, a really, you know, kind of boxing match essentially. These are 5 winnable games, and Luka hopefully will have, you know, a game under his belt against Portland before you face Memphis at home on Tuesday. So, you know, I think the Mavs come out of this 5-0. I think the way that they're rolling right now, I think they're hard to stop. I mean, you know, even at end of games, I mean, it's Kyrie's been lighting it up in the fourth quarter, but we've seen PJ turn it on in the fourth. We've seen Najee turn it on in the fourth. And as a defense, who are you gonna, you know, who's your focus on? And now you put Luka back into that mix. I mean, it's a nightmare for defenses. So I'm gonna say it again. I'm gonna say the Mavs go 5-0 this week, and we'll see if I'm right this time.
No, I think for them to really hone in on being a contender, because the eye test and the advanced stats, you know, the offensive rating, defense net rating, and all that stuff, it shows that they are a contender, but the record obviously doesn't, because that 4-game losing streak by 8 total points really affected the record. But when you have these 5 games, I agree with you. I think they have to go 5-0, and I don't think that's a stretch when you just all the points that you made, and these are winnable games. And not only that, they can really stand up because they're tied right now. Obviously, you know, this is like you always say, it's November, but you know, it's still something to look at, because if they win this game against the Jazz, they have the 5th best record in the West, and they would move up beyond. They would pass the Nuggets, they would pass the Lakers, they're already above the Suns, and you know, they would move up over the Clippers, and that's just you know, talking about trajectory of the rest of the season, if you can take care of games you're supposed to win. And then also, you know, who's above them? It's the Grizzlies. They have the 4th best record. They're about to play them soon. So like, if you take care of business, you will slowly get back to being at the top, where people talk about you with the Thunder, they'll talk about you with the Cavs, they'll talk about you with the Celtics. And so it's just all about you. The ball is really in their court, especially with Luka coming back and everybody else playing so well. They have to take care of these games, and then once they do, the sky is the limit for them. We can talk about small little trades that can push them over the top, but this is majority of this roster is the team that will be in the playoffs. So you want to see them healthy, and you also want to see Clay come back and get back to shooting hot. So that would make the. Can you imagine this team with Luka and Clay playing great?
Fully healthy. I mean, and that's again another luxury that Clay is out, and you can let him rest. Let him get back healthy, because you've got the depth to be able to play guys like Quentin Grimes and Najee Marshall that can just kind of fit in that starting spot. And then with Spencer coming off the bench, that's another ball handler that you've got, and another playmaker and shooter that's been playing well the last couple of games. And so the Mavericks can have that luxury now of being able to rest guys like Luka and rest Clay now for as long as he needs until he's fully healthy. You don't have to rush him back.
And Shahnavaz, I know we said it with Najee Marshall. If he could just find a 3-point shot, he would be a complete player.
Watch out.
He has found it.
Watch out.
Shahnavaz, I mean, I'm just asking. I know we said it's off limits, but if he continues to make these 3-point shots, do you insert him in the starting lineup over Clay?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't. I keep him on the bench. What? Don't mess with what's working.
There you have it, folks. All right. I hope everyone had a happy Thanksgiving with their loved ones. Really cherished that time together. But we also want to thank y'all in the season of Thanksgiving. We want to thank y'all for tuning in. We just passed 6,000 subscribers on YouTube. So we're constantly going up like the Mavs. And we appreciate y'all just tuning into our content, our podcast, all the videos that we post, getting back to, where we are as a company, just like our Twitter and our Facebook. We're happy to see the YouTube is heading in that direction. So we appreciate all of y'all tuning in to Shahnavaz and I. You can follow us on social. You see our handles. You'll see our tweets and our just analysis on the games. So we appreciate y'all constantly tuning in. We really do. So hopefully the Mavericks take care of business. They play tonight against the Jazz, they play against the Blazers. We talked about the next 3 games of that 5-game stretch. We'll see how they do. Thanks everyone for tuning in.